The Celestial Pact was formed in an era of hope and unity, a grand alliance of countless species scattered across the vastness of space. Its purpose was simple: to foster peace, cooperation, and mutual protection against any force that might threaten the harmony of the galaxy. For centuries, the Pact thrived, bringing prosperity to its members and forging a golden age where conflicts were swiftly resolved and understanding flourished. Then, humanity entered the scene. A young species by galactic standards, they arrived from the fringes, their planet a mere speck on the outer edge of a quiet spiral arm. But their impact was immediate and profound. They brought with them a reputation for fierce independence and a history steeped in conflict, war, and survival against all odds. Humans quickly proved themselves adept at warfare and strategy, often outthinking opponents twice their size or strength. It wasn't long before they were recognized as one of the most formidable members of the Celestial Pact. At first, many in the Pact marveled at humanity's ingenuity and resilience. Human fleets, small and nimble, could outmaneuver larger armadas with ease. Their soldiers were relentless, refusing to yield even in the face of overwhelming odds. On more than one occasion, they turned the tide of crucial battles, securing victories that had seemed impossible. Their strategic brilliance and adaptability became legendary, earning them both admiration and unease. Yet, as the years passed, the unease grew into something darker. Whispers spread among the peaceful species of the Pact. The humans were different. They did not merely fight to defend, they fought to win, to dominate. Their tactics, though effective, were often seen as aggressive, even brutal. Some species began to see the humans not as allies but as a potential threat. "What happens when there are no more enemies left?" they asked in hushed voices. "Will the humans turn their weapons on us?" Incidents began to occur. In one skirmish, human commanders pursued a fleeing enemy fleet far beyond the agreed-upon borders, destroying them completely, leaving no survivors. In another, human forces deployed a weapon of mass disruption that, while non-lethal, incapacitated an entire planet's communication systems for days. To the humans, these were tactical decisions, necessary to ensure victory and prevent future conflict. But to the other species, they were signs of a deeper, more dangerous nature. Fear took root. Quiet discussions in dimly lit chambers turned into secret meetings behind closed doors. Representatives from the most influential species convened in secrecy, sharing their concerns about the humans' growing influence and their unpredictable behavior. They debated for months, weighing their options, until they reached a chilling consensus: humanity was too dangerous to remain part of the Pact. The decision was made. Earth would be isolated. Using their most advanced technologies, the Pact members worked together to construct an invisible barrier around the solar system. It was designed to block all forms of communication and travel, both in and out. Simultaneously, all records of humanity's existence were erased from their archives, as if Earth and its people had never existed. The humans soon noticed. Their transmissions, once filled with chatter from distant stars, fell silent. Their ships, once exploring the depths of space, were suddenly turned back by unseen forces. At first, there was confusion. Scientists and military leaders sought explanations, tried to breach the barrier, to no avail. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months, and realization set in. They had been abandoned, betrayed by those they once called allies. But humanity did not crumble. Instead, they turned their gaze inward. They fortified their defenses, began to innovate, to adapt, to prepare for the day they might face the galaxy again. In their isolation, they honed their skills, turning Earth into a fortress, a world always ready for a war that might one day come. They vowed never to be caught off guard again. Time passed, and the memory of humans faded from the galaxy's collective consciousness. The Celestial Pact carried on, though now without the specter of Earth looming in the background. They thought they had contained the threat, that humanity would remain a distant, forgotten relic of the past. But the galaxy has a way of spinning its secrets back into the light. Far beyond the Pact's borders, an old enemy stirred. The Nalgath, conquerors who had once brought the galaxy to its knees, had returned. No longer content with their exile, they launched a swift, merciless assault on the weakened remnants of the pact. Panic spread as worlds fell one by one. In desperation, the pact leaders unearthed the forbidden records, the ones they had sworn to forget. Their only hope lay in the forgotten guardians they had betrayed, the humans. Now, with their extinction looming, they prepared to face the very species they had once cast out into the cold of space. The emissaries were dispatched with a single message: "We need your help." What they would find on Earth was unknown, and the fear of what awaited them was almost as great as the fear of the Nalgath themselves. The forgotten guardians had been left alone for too long, and no one could predict what form their retribution might take. The Nalgath were once the scourge of the galaxy, a race that knew only conquest and domination. Their fleets had cut through the stars like a blade, leaving nothing but ashes in their wake. For centuries they ravaged world after world, growing ever more powerful, their empire stretching across vast regions of space. It had taken the combined might of the Celestial Pact, every fleet, and every resource to drive them back, to defeat them and finally force them into exile in a remote sector of the galaxy. They were presumed destroyed, their civilization shattered, their name all but forgotten. But the Nalgath were not dead. In secret they had rebuilt their strength, hidden from prying eyes, their ambition burning hotter than ever. And now they had returned. Without warning, their fleets descended upon the Pact worlds, attacking with a ferocity unmatched by anything seen in centuries. They showed no mercy, targeting civilian and military installations alike, wiping out entire populations. The worlds of the Pact, unprepared for such a brutal assault after so many years of peace, crumbled under the onslaught. Desperation spread through the Celestial Pact like a wildfire. Their leaders scrambled to respond, calling upon whatever forces they had left, but the reality was grim. Centuries of peace had made them complacent. Their fleets were underfunded, under-equipped, their soldiers untested in true battle. Some worlds had dismantled their defenses entirely, believing the age of war was behind them. Now, faced with the unstoppable force of the Nalgath, the Pact's leaders realized they were woefully unprepared. Panic set in, and fear took hold as they watched their worlds fall one by one. In a council chamber deep within the heart of the Pact's capital, the leaders of the remaining species gathered, their faces grim. They debated, argued, and shouted, seeking some solution to the crisis. Some called for immediate surrender, hoping to negotiate terms with the Nalgath and save what little remained of their worlds. Others pushed for a desperate defense, to muster what forces they could and make a final stand. But one voice cut through the noise, cold and calculating. "There is one option left," it said. "One option we have not yet considered." All eyes turned to the speaker, who slowly and deliberately reached for a hidden console. The room fell silent as they entered a code, and a panel slid open, revealing a set of ancient, forbidden records. Records that were never meant to see the light of day again. The leaders leaned forward, and for a moment, there was only the sound of breathing as they read. Then, one by one, their faces turned pale. It was humanity, the warrior species they had cast out so long ago, banished from the galactic order, their existence erased from history. They had been too dangerous, too unpredictable, and too violent to be allowed to remain. But now, they might be the only hope left. A murmur spread through the room as some protested, reminding the others of why the humans were exiled in the first place. They warned of the consequences of unleashing a species with such a history of warfare, a species that might not forgive their betrayal. Yet the situation was dire, and time was running out. Every moment they hesitated, more worlds fell, and more lives were lost. Reluctantly, the leaders agreed that they had no choice. They would contact the humans. A small delegation would be sent, a few brave souls chosen to venture through the old barriers, to find Earth, and plead for their help. The decision made, they hurried to assemble the emissaries and prepare them for the mission. The journey was perilous. The emissaries, traveling in a single, unarmed diplomatic vessel, moved cautiously through the shattered remains of old hyperspace routes. They navigated past the debris of forgotten battles and the remnants of long-abandoned stations. The closer they came to the edges of the human frontier, the more anxious they became. For so long, Earth had been a myth, a ghost story told to frighten the young, a planet surrounded by forbidden space, where no signal was ever returned. At last, they reached the edge of the barrier. The emissaries felt their nerves tighten as they activated the ship's transmitters, sending out signals of peace, of surrender, of desperation. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, without warning, their sensors lit up, and they saw them, ships, dozens of them, larger and more advanced than anything they had seen before. They formed a wall in space, blocking their path. The emissaries' hearts pounded as the human ships surrounded them, engines humming with a power they could not comprehend. A voice crackled over the communication channels, stern and commanding, demanding to know who they were and why they had come. The emissaries, trembling, began their plea. They spoke of the Nalgath, of the pact's betrayal, of their desperation and need for help. For a moment, there was no response. The human fleet hovered in place, silent, imposing. The emissaries could feel the weight of the humans' gaze upon them, the cold, calculated consideration of a species that had been preparing for this moment for centuries. Then, finally, a response. "Prepare to be boarded," the voice said. "We will hear what you have to say." The emissaries exchanged anxious glances, uncertain of what would happen next. They knew the fate of their worlds rested on this fragile encounter. They had come seeking salvation, but now, they realized, they might have awakened something far more dangerous. The emissaries stared out at Earth's defenses, a sight that defied everything they had anticipated. They had expected a backwater world, a planet crippled by centuries of isolation, perhaps even primitive compared to the rest of the galaxy. What they saw instead was an immense and sophisticated network of orbital platforms, automated turrets, and countless starships in perfect formation. The defense grid hummed with unseen energy, its power undeniable, its readiness clear. Every scanner they had brought with them was overwhelmed with signals, each more complex than the last. Nothing in their archives had prepared them for this. The humans had not stagnated, they had evolved. Their vessel was soon encircled by a human fleet, a dozen ships forming a tight perimeter, their weapon systems locked and trained on the emissaries. The design of the ships was unlike anything they had seen before, sleek, angular, with reinforced hulls and strange, glowing patterns that shifted like living things. It was clear that these ships were not just built for war, they were designed to intimidate, to dominate. The emissaries felt a shiver of unease, realizing they had underestimated the humans profoundly. A message crackled over their communication system, cutting through the tension with a voice that was firm and authoritative. The human fleet commander introduced himself with no hint of friendliness, his tone cold and direct. He demanded to know who the emissaries were and what business they had in Earth's restricted space. His words were clipped, giving no room for misunderstanding. The emissaries could sense the skepticism, the underlying hostility. This was not a welcoming party, it was an interrogation. The emissaries, their voices unsteady, explained their purpose, outlining the situation with the Nalgath and the threat that now loomed over the entire galaxy. They spoke of the destruction, the desperation, and the hope that humanity, once part of the Celestial Pact, might still answer their call for help. They hesitated, then mentioned the forbidden records, the secret history of humanity's exile, and how it had come to be erased from memory. As they spoke, the tension in the air grew thicker, the silence on the other end heavy and expectant. When the commander finally spoke again, his voice was harsher, filled with anger. He wanted to know why humanity had been abandoned, betrayed by those they once considered allies. He demanded to know who had made the decision to erase them from the galaxy's history, to cut them off and leave them alone to face whatever threats might come. The bitterness in his tone was palpable, echoing centuries of isolation, suspicion, and preparation for an enemy that had never appeared. The emissaries, sensing the shift, quickly tried to explain. They described the fear that had gripped the pact, the paranoia of humanity's potential strength, and how it had driven the leaders to take drastic measures. But their words only seemed to fuel the humans' anger further. The commander's response was sharp, filled with contempt for the cowardice that had led to their exile. He reminded them of the sacrifices humanity had made, the battles they had fought to defend the pact, only to be repaid with treachery. After a long pause, the commander made a decision. He offered a temporary truce, allowing the emissaries to land on Earth and state their case directly to the leaders of humanity. But he warned them, any assistance would come at a price, and there would be no discussion of aid until there were answers for the betrayal. The humans would demand explanations, reparations, and guarantees before even considering lifting a finger in defense of the galaxy that had turned its back on them. The emissaries, feeling the weight of the moment, nodded in agreement. They understood that their mission had become far more complicated than they had imagined. This was not merely a plea for help but a negotiation for survival. As their ship was guided toward the surface, they exchanged glances filled with doubt and fear. They had no idea what awaited them on Earth, only that they were stepping into a world of warriors, a species wronged and angered, who held the fate of the galaxy in their hands. They knew that the coming discussions would not just decide the fate of the pact but would also reveal whether humanity could ever forgive, or if they were preparing for a different kind of reckoning. The emissaries were escorted into the heart of Earth's command center, a place that radiated power and precision. They were met by the Council, a formidable group of individuals representing humanity's best minds in strategy, science, and military command. The atmosphere was tense, every eye on the emissaries, weighing their every move, their every word. The humans knew they held all the cards, and their expressions reflected a mixture of curiosity and guarded hostility. They were not here to listen passively. They were here to decide the fate of the galaxy on their own terms. The emissaries began their plea, their voices betraying their desperation. They spoke of the Nalgatha's relentless advance, describing the devastation that had swept across the Pact's worlds. They painted a vivid picture of the horror, entire planets reduced to rubble, populations wiped out, and defenses crumbling under the sheer force of the onslaught. They did not shy away from the truth, laying bare the Pact's weakness. They admitted their military was a shadow of its former self, ill-prepared for a conflict of this scale, and pleaded for humanity's intervention, hoping to appeal to their sense of justice and duty. The Council listened in silence, their faces impassive. When the emissaries finished, there was a moment of stillness before one of the human leaders spoke. The voice was calm but edged with steel. The humans had not forgotten the betrayal that had led to their isolation. They had spent centuries in the dark, preparing for a threat that never came, growing stronger and more capable with every passing year. Now, they demanded a reckoning. If the Pact wanted humanity's help, there would be terms, non-negotiable and absolute. First, humanity would have complete autonomy in leading the war against the Nalgath. They would not be bound by the Pact's outdated conventions or hesitant politics. The humans would decide the strategy, the targets, and the methods, without interference or oversight. They would lead the charge, and the Pact would follow, no questions asked. Second, they demanded unrestricted access to all the resources the Pact could offer. Every ship, every weapon, every piece of technology, it would all be at humanity's disposal. The Pact would supply, and humanity would wield. Third, there would be a public acknowledgement of humanity's forced exile and the betrayal that led to it. The galaxy would know the truth, that humans had been cast out not because of their aggression but because of the Pact's fear and paranoia. Humanity's honor would be restored, and their place in the galaxy would be reclaimed. Fourth, they demanded full reparations for the centuries of isolation, economic, technological, and territorial compensation to make up for the losses they had endured. And finally, they required a permanent seat of authority in any future galactic governance, a voice equal to or greater than any other, to ensure they would never again be treated as expendable. The emissaries felt the weight of these demands. They knew the Pact would balk at such terms, but they also understood they had no choice. The Nalgath were an existential threat, and without humanity, they had no hope of survival. They looked at each other, sharing silent thoughts of fear and resignation. After a few moments of hushed discussion, they turned back to the Council, their faces grim. They agreed to the terms, knowing full well that this was their last, best chance to save their worlds. The humans wasted no time. As soon as the agreement was reached, orders were issued across Earth and beyond. Fleets mobilized with a speed that shocked the emissaries, who watched as vast armadas began to assemble. Thousands of ships, each brimming with weaponry and technology far beyond anything the Pact had imagined, moved with purpose and precision. Soldiers, engineers, and pilots, all seasoned and ready, prepared for a war they had been training for their entire lives. Humanity's war machines came to life, sleek and deadly, with weapon systems that defied comprehension. New strategies were drafted, tactics refined, and battle simulations conducted at a breakneck pace. The emissaries marveled at the efficiency and organization, realizing just how deeply humanity had been underestimated. They had spent their isolation preparing for a moment exactly like this, and now they were ready to unleash their might upon the galaxy. As the fleets prepared to jump into hyperspace, the emissaries could feel the tension in the air. The Pact had called upon its forgotten guardians, but no one could predict what kind of war the humans would wage. The galaxy held its breath, teetering on the edge of a conflict unlike any it had ever seen before. Humanity, once cast aside, was now poised to lead the charge, and their enemies would soon learn the cost of waking a warrior species from its long slumber. The human fleets emerged from hyperspace in a manner that defied conventional tactics. Instead of forming predictable lines or standard formations, they appeared from multiple directions, converging on the Nalgath with precision and speed that left both allies and enemies scrambling to comprehend. Their ships moved with a grace and agility that belied their size, and within moments, they were upon the Nalgath armada, striking with an intensity that stunned all who witnessed it. The initial clash was brutal and swift. Human warships deployed weapons unseen in the galaxy before, projectiles that bypassed traditional shields, energy beams that sliced through enemy hulls with surgical precision, and drones that swarmed like angry hornets, overwhelming the Nalgath defenses. Each move was calculated, every strike deliberate. They disrupted communication networks, severed supply lines, and isolated enemy vessels, dismantling the Nalgath's formation piece by piece. The humans showed no mercy, their tactics ruthless and unrelenting, designed to maximize impact with minimal loss. The Pact's fleets, initially hesitant, watched in awe as the humans carved a path through the Nalgath forces. Slowly, they began to rally behind the human commanders, following their lead, moving in synchronization with a newfound sense of purpose. The humans had taken the initiative, and their allies followed, galvanized by their courage and effectiveness. The tide began to turn, the Nalgath finding themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. For the first time since their resurgence, they faced an enemy they could not predict, an enemy who fought with a level of cunning and ferocity they had not anticipated. Humanity's relentless spirit became evident as the battle wore on. Every move the Nalgath made, every tactic they employed, was countered with swift and decisive action. Human commanders anticipated their maneuvers, turning their strategies against them, exploiting every weakness with unerring accuracy. The Nalgath, who had seemed unstoppable, found themselves losing ground, their ships falling in rapid succession. The humans adapted with a fluidity that the Nalgath could not match, using the vast emptiness of space to their advantage, drawing the enemy into traps, and striking where they were least expected. The other species in the Pact began to see the humans in a new light. The fear that had once driven them to exile humanity now mingled with a deep respect. They saw the humans' prowess on the battlefield, their unwavering determination, their willingness to do whatever was necessary to win. They had underestimated humanity's capacity for war, but now they understood why they had once been a critical part of the Celestial Pact. The humans were not just warriors, they were protectors, capable of standing against the greatest threats the galaxy had ever known. The final stand came on the edge of a distant star system, where the Nalgath, desperate and cornered, chose to make their last stand. They gathered their remaining forces, forming a formidable line, hoping to turn the tide one final time. Humanity, leading the combined Pact forces, was ready. The battle that followed was ferocious, with both sides throwing everything they had into the fray. The humans, however, were prepared for this moment. Their strategy was flawless, their execution precise. As the battle raged on, the human fleet pushed forward, exploiting every gap, every mistake. They showed no signs of slowing, even as the Nalgath fought with the desperation of a cornered beast. The final blow came when a human battleship, larger and more powerful than anything the Nalgath had ever faced, broke through their lines and unleashed a devastating barrage, tearing through the enemy's flagship and sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The Nalgath, leaderless and broken, finally succumbed. The once feared conquerors were defeated, their threat extinguished for good. The victory, however, did not come without a cost. Many human ships lay damaged or destroyed, and the losses were felt deeply. Yet, the humans stood victorious, their place in the galaxy restored. They had proven themselves beyond doubt, not just to the pact, but to the entire galaxy. They were no longer the forgotten guardians. They were warriors reborn, their strength and resolve unmatched. With the Nalgath threat eliminated, humanity's leaders addressed the galaxy. They made it clear that they would continue to protect, but on their own terms. They would be equal partners in any alliance, respected and never again treated as expendable. They spoke of cooperation, of unity, but also of strength, making it known that they would never allow themselves to be isolated or betrayed again. The galaxy listened, and for the first time in centuries, they truly understood what it meant to have humanity as an ally. The humans had not just fought to win a war, they had fought to reclaim their place among the stars, to remind the galaxy of who they were and what they were capable of. The galaxy may have tried to forget them, but now, it would never forget the humans.